Hey guys, this is Mrs. Yeagle, and that is Creepy Charlie. We are here to finish chapter 15 of Addison Cooke and the Tomb of the Con. And in today's game of Where's Mrs. Yeagle Reading From Us, it's inside my car in my garage.
Yep.
After baseball practice.
My baseball. And
there
I'm
it is.
on third base.
Okay, now it's reading time. So please turn to page 160. I'm going to start right in the middle. Addison didn't imagine it was possible to be worse than Molly with the sword, and yet here he was. Tony would surely have skewered him by now if he hadn't been laughing so hard. Addison's heart sank. He'd read so many swashbuckling adventure books, and apparently none of them had rubbed off. As good as Ludwig van Beethoven was at playing a piano, that's how bad Addison was at swinging a sword. He came extremely close to decapitating Raj and even himself. Out of options, he attempted a direct poke at Tony's ribs. Tony deflected this with a trench knife and grabbed the handle of Sir Frederick's sword. It happened as quickly as a sleight-of-hand trick. To Addison's amazement, Tony now held the sword, admiring it in the gleam of Eddie's flashlight. "It's much safer for your team if I hold on to this." Addison had to agree. Besides, he felt the vague inkling of a plan coming on, tickling at him like an impending sneeze. Madame Fing's men were only a few chambers away, working their way closer in the gloom. Addison spotted Raj's spool of fishing line lying on the cavern floor. "Eddie, pass me the fishing line." Tony swung the long sword in a wide, flashing arc. Eddie pressed his back against the wall. "I think I'm gonna pass." Addison danced backward from one of Tony's swipes. "You can pass out when you're dead. Toss me that line." He knew Tony was attempting to stall them until the rest of Madame Fing's triads arrived. "Eddie, now!" Eddie stared at the slashing sword, transfixed. "This isn't happening," he muttered. "I'm at home in my bed. Mother, is that you? I finished piano practice. May I go downstairs to Restaurant Anatolio for some shawarma?" "Snap out of it, Eddie." Eddie turned to blink at Addison. He had the blank, confused look of a basset hound trying to read the editorial page of the Washington Post. "Eddie, fight! We have 8 hands, and he only has 2. "I have delicate hands, and they're made for piano keys." "Fine," said Addison. "Just turn off the flashlight." This Eddie could do. The tunnel plunged into darkness. Addison ducked Tony's sword and dove for the reel of fishing line, grasping it in the pitch black. He found Tony's ankle and wound a few loops of line around it before rolling from the path of the striking sword. Sparks shot up from the cave wall where their metal struck. "Eddie, turn the light back on." In the dark tunnel, the flashlight was so bright it hurt Addison's eyes. "Mo, hot potato!" He tossed the reel to Molly, who passed it to Raj, who threw it back to Addison. Tony was soon snagged in a growing web of fishing line strong enough to reel in an 800-pound bluefin tuna. The team kept passing around the fishing wire until Tony was hemmed in like a caterpillar in a cocoon. "Ha!" said Addison. Tony dropped the sword and drew his trench knives. He slashed the cords, freeing his arms. "Ha!" said Tony. Addison was not too proud to admit when he was beaten. Tony could fight, but for at least a few more seconds he could not run. Addison turned and fled headlong down the tunnel. Molly kept pace at his side. Eddie and Raj were somewhere behind. They were easy to track in the dark, what with Eddie's screaming. "Nice work with that sword," Molly called to Addison. "Thanks, Molly. I love sarcasm." "No, you don't," said Molly. "I know," said Addison. "I was being sarcastic." Molly paused to let Raj and Eddie run past. After all, Eddie still had the flashlight. She counted 3 Mississippis and then yanked a tripwire, triggering a stone door to slam down, blocking the tunnel after her. She listened for the satisfying thwack of Tony the Triad running smack into the door in the dark. Up ahead, Raj and Eddie took a hard corner in the tunnel and collided with an unsuspecting Triad, sending the gang member sprawling. By some rare miracle of physics, Raj and Eddie were uninjured. The Triad lay flat on his back as if he'd recently played chicken with a wrecking ball. Raj realized he had just bested a gang member in single combat, even if it was by accident. This was perhaps the single greatest moment of his life. "Yeah, New York City, 86th Street!" Raj pounded his fist against his chest. He stopped shouting when a crowd of fresh triads rounded the corner at a fine clip. Raj's eyes bulged from their sockets. Addison grabbed him by the sleeve. "Come on, Raj, before they 86 us!" The group bounded down the final passage, their leg muscles burning. Molly had the presence of mind to trigger one last stone door, slowing their pursuers. Addison's team scrambled up the narrow chute, darted through the secret crypt, hurtled across the hospital ward, tore out of the sacristy, and exploded onto the chaotic streets of Kashgar. They hid behind a cartload of cardamom. Eddie put his head between his knees, sucking oxygen. After a minute, he remembered to turn off Addison's flashlight to save the batteries. Molly sighed. After all that, the triads have the sword of Sir Frederick. "On the bright side," said Addison, "at least we don't have to lug that thing around." That is the end of chapter 15.
Next up, chapter 15. Or 16.
16.
Blah, 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 banana.